Welcome to Season 7 of True Blue Conversations with your host, Adam Bloom. Real talk with those who pledge to keep us safe with grit, sacrifice and determination. Let's get on with the show. This episode of True Blue Conversations is proudly brought to you by Loudon Private Wealth, the team trusted by professionals, veterans and families across Australia to build real long-term financial security. If you want to take control of your finances, protect your future and build real generational wealth, Loudon Private Wealth are the people you want in your corner. They don't do gimmicks, they don't do hype, just smart strategy and honest advice, coupled with real-world experience. Check out the links in the description to contact Warren and the team via loudonpw.com.au or 02 8313 0418. Now let's get back to the show. This episode of True Blue Conversations was brought to you by Dead Reckoning Rum, creating individual rum releases commemorating the diggers lost in Afghanistan, proudly supporting veterans, donating 50% of all their profits to veterans organisations around Australia. Look up Dead Reckoning Rum, buy some bottles, connect via Instagram and Facebook and give them your support. Now, let's get back to the show.
G'day, welcome back to True Blue. Today, I'm joined by a special guest from the UK, and when I read the next paragraph of what this lady achieved in her career is just mind-blowing, and you'll be impressed with what she's about to share in her story and what she's gone on to do since leaving the military. So today I'm joined by Mandy Hickson, a former Royal Air Force fast jet pilot who was the first female to fly the Tornado GR4 on the front lines. Mandy served for over a 25-year military career. She completed 45 missions over Iraq, served as a combat survival and rescue officer, and navigated the challenges of operating in a high-pressure, male-dominant environment, all while raising a young family. Mandy, welcome to the podcast. It's an absolute privilege to have you here.
Oh, it's my pleasure to be here as well, Adam. So thank you for inviting me on.
So before we get into your military career, Mandy, let's go back to a young Mandy. Talk to me about life growing up as you as a young lady.
As a young lady, so for the listeners that are obviously worldwide, so I was growing up in the north of England. It wasn't particularly privileged upbringing at all. We didn't have an awful lot while we were growing up, and we were growing up in a place, Manchester. So many people know it for Manchester United and Manchester City, the football teams, but there is a little bit more to it than that, I do promise. But so I grew up, my parents divorced when I was 2, in a time where it was really unusual, actually, for parents to divorce. So I know it's much more common now, but I mean, I was the only person in my school year who had divorced parents. So it was that sort of slightly unusual situation. But I kept a really close relationship with my dad, and he was always very, very present in our lives as well. So we saw him every weekend. So it wasn't this sort of feeling of this very, traumatic split. But my mum was an incredible woman, really strong role model. And she never badmouthed my dad, so hence we could have that good relationship with him as well. So, I'm very lucky to say I grew up in a very happy house. My older sister of 18 months older than me, Sarah, myself and my mum. So we were like the Three Musketeers in many ways. And then we saw my dad at the weekend. So no, it was a very happy upbringing as well.
What were you like at school? Were you a scholar? Or most veterans or first responders I've had on, Mandy, aren't very good academically. How did you go?
Well, I was okay. I would say I was sort of middle to top, sort of sitting in that upper echelon of the schooling sort of hierarchy. But it was really interesting, actually. So I sort of came into my own when I was I won lots of leadership awards, actually, when I was at school. So there would be national and regional leadership awards, which my school would seem to put me forward. So I was always captain of every sports team. So I did netball, I did hockey, rounders, tennis, and I was always the captain. was also quite into my sort of musical theatre. We did like Oliver and Bugsy Malone and all of those. And I was always played a part in those. So I was really, really active in the school life. I really enjoyed school. I loved it. One of those really unusual people that did love school, and it did come easily to me. And I know that's not the case for everybody at all. So I do feel really blessed that I can say that. I went to an all-girls school, so there was no sort of stigma around choosing science subjects. There was none of this STEM. We didn't know what STEM was because you just did subjects that you liked, and I liked maths and science and technology and all of those sorts of subjects because, those were the things that really floated my boat. But the big making of me actually came really when my sister was doing her A-levels, which is your sort of further education, the higher education bit, the 16 to 18 exams. I was doing my GCSEs at the age of 15, 16. And my sister really wanted to be a doctor. And she hadn't got the grades in her mocks. And she was therefore being predicted grades that were too low to get her a place at university to become a doctor. But she was determined. And so she said to the staff, please put me in for these grades. I will get them. And they said, we can't. You're not going to get them. Why not be a nurse? And she said, I don't want to be a nurse. I want to be a doctor, and I will do it. And those, no, you won't. So she worked. Oh my God. So you do your exams in the UK in May and June time. She started in November. Now, most people start in around about April, and they'll do like a month or so's work. But no, Sarah would sit there for 4 hours every single night from November almost. I got to sort of like December, got to just after Christmas. And I was doing my GCSEs at the time. So, a bit easier. And I just felt so sad that she was working so hard in her room. And I sort of got guilted into it. And I thought, I can't have her just sitting up there and working all the time. So I ended up working with her. And the two of us set this little routine where we'd work for 3 hours and then we'd give each other a massage. And we did that every single night. But because of that, I came out with straight A's across the board. So I got 9 A's and 2 B's. So I did like 11 exams, which is really unusual as well. And I got those grades, not because I'm really hyper intelligent, but because I just did the revision, and that's what I would say to anyone, when you put the work in, if you don't have, and I know that you have dyslexia, and my 2 sons have dyslexia, and my husband has dyslexia, so I know when I'm talking here, I know it's not that easy for everyone to say put the work in and it comes. I know it doesn't work like that. You can put the work in and it doesn't come. I was lucky that it did. So yeah, I was pretty blessed.
So as I mentioned at the start, you end up joining the military, but where did that come into your mind to join up? And did you have family members that had served before you, or were you the first?
Yeah, so my grandpa was a pilot in the Second World War, and I'd grown up hearing some of his crazy stories of landing. He was an instructor actually out in South Africa flying the Harvard. And I'd sort of grown up hearing some of these stories of landing in round anthills in Africa and things like that. And it always sat there in the back of my mind. And so the Air Cadets, which is an organisation run free of charge actually for young people in this country, 13 to sort of 18-year-olds, they opened their doors to girls. And my mum suggested I join. I did. I flew and I loved it. And I remember saying to the pilot, excuse me, sir, do you get paid for this? And he laughed at me and he said, well, of course I get paid for it. It's my job, but it's also my passion. It's something I always have loved doing. And this was like the first time I'd ever heard anyone linking these two words of passion, purpose and career. Because I'd been surrounded by people who went to work. My dad ran a carpet business, flooring. My mum was a teacher and she didn't particularly enjoy it, if I'm really honest. It was quite a tough school. And so I'd sort of seen people going to work because they had to. And then this man was saying that this was a passion. And I was thinking, oh my God, if you could do this, I'm never going to have to work for another day in my life. You're following your purpose and your passion. And so that's when I set my sights on flying fast jets in the Air Force.
And that's what I like straight away. I hear that, and as we're going to get to, it didn't go all your way. Of you had that dream, but you had to overcome some adversity, and we'll get to that a little bit down the track when you joined. So, talk me through the process back in 1994. So, the Falklands War had happened. Peacetime military in 1994. What was the process for you to join up back then?
So I'll just take you back a tiny little bit, but
Sure.
basically, yeah, women weren't allowed to be pilots. So that was really quite a big stumbling block. So yeah, I'd chosen this job, but it didn't exist. So what I did was my mum just kept saying, just do everything you can. Just put yourself in the best position. It'll change eventually. That, she's very pragmatic like that, classic Taurian. And so she sort of just put yourself in a good position. So, so I did. I did head girl at school. I was in the Air Cadets. I ended up being a sergeant. I did every extracurricular thing with regards to leadership that I could, so that if they did change the rules, I'm in a good position. I also applied for this thing called a flying scholarship, which was going to give me 30 hours, of free flying. And when I went for the selection for this, I was told I was obese. I was told I had to remedy an obesity problem. And I weighed at the time, and I don't, do you tend to work in kilos
Yeah,
over there,
we
or?
work in kilos. Yeah.
Yeah. You'll have to put a note on what this weight is then, because I can't work out maths in public. But no, so I was 12 and a half stone, and I was told I should weigh 9.5, and I'm 6 foot tall, by the way. So other than cutting a limb off, I couldn't see how I was going to lose like 3 and a bit stone to get to this weight. But that's what they said, remedy your obesity problem, because the height charts of women went up to 5'8", and they hadn't really done any more research. They just went, oh, you should be this. So anyway, I did go on the world's biggest diet, lost the weight eventually, and got given the scholarship. And then I went off and I flew the 30 hours, and I used my newspaper round money. And my granny gave me a little donation, and I had enough then to do my private pilot's license, which was the additional 10 hours. And you need 40 hours to get your license, and I got it on 40 hours, dead on, point zero. Got my license, and then I went off to university, and then we're hitting that period. I was at uni from 91 to 94, and I joined this club, the University Air Squadron, which is another free organisation, again done to stimulate interest from graduates now to get them into the military. And I was flying with them, and it was a stage where they had 5 aircraft on these squadrons. They took 30 people every year. I got 160 hours of flying. Now, for any aspiring pilots, that's a gift beyond a gift. They took me all the way through the flying syllabus to doing tail chasing, formation, full aerobatics competitions, national aerobatics competitions. It was phenomenal. And that was the thing that really molded me to say, I want to get in. Because up to then I'd had a passion for flying, not necessarily for the military. I was in the back of my mind, I love flying. Maybe I'll go commercial. But once I was in that University Air Squadron, oh my God, it was fun. It was cheap alcohol. It was very fun. And the camaraderie was off the scale. And actually, when I look back now, the majority of my friends who are really great friends from the Air Force days are the friends that I actually met on the University Air Squadron that then joined actually as well.
Yeah, right. So as you're saying, your job didn't exist at the start. So you end up 94, you end up joining, but your job doesn't exist. So Mandy, what do you do first when you first join the RAF?
So in 1992, they changed the rules and allowed
Right.
women to become pilots. Now, there was a lady called Jo Salter. Now, Jo's a really great friend of mine now. So Jo became she was already going through engineering training. So she was an engineer at university, and then she was going through officer training as an engineer, and she was in the right time, right place, had finished officer training, and they said they changed the rules to allow women to fly. She applied, and she instantly swapped across onto pilot training and straight through. So suddenly she's almost like 3 years ahead of me in the scheme of things. I, meanwhile, apply, and I failed all the aptitude tests to be a pilot. And then I took them for the second and last time, and I failed them again. And that really sort of should have been the end of the line. And I was really lucky that the boss of this club, this University Air Squadron, he didn't look at my test results and say, Mandy's failed, therefore she's no good. He said, but Mandy's failed, but why has she failed? How revolutionary. Look at a root cause, Adam. My goodness. And we talked to know beforehand, and my husband and I talk a lot, in our second book about trying to get to the root cause behind why is someone failing. If they're performing in a really strong way, why are they failing this test? And he didn't say, well, you failed the test, therefore you're no good. He said, well, you failed the test, so what's wrong with the test? This doesn't make sense. You're our best performing pilot. So he went back to the Air Force and started to challenge their testing system. And they discovered that about 70% of women were failing these tests outright, compared to about 70% of men that were passing them. So in the end, the Air Force took me on not as a pilot, but they took me on as their traffic controller. And again, on his guidance, he said, Mandy, once you're in, we can make your case from within. But if you don't even take this, the whole thing about the military has always been that they take people on for who they are, as their officer qualities or as, their personalities. And then once you're in, you now can swap potentially. I mean, there's not often a lot of changing around, but you can now potentially take on the organization, but you've been taken on for who you are. That's really important for your leadership capability. And so that's what I did. I joined as an air trafficker. And once I was in, I just wrote so many letters to any of the younger listeners. That's like an email, but takes a damn sight lot longer. And I think I just wore them down. I just sent all these letters, and he was sending letters, and we were boring them. I think they were just like, enough now. And we finally got this letter, and I was going through officer training at the time. And it just sort of arrived in this, insignificant brown envelope, and I just opened it. It said, "Dear Flying Officer Wells," which was my name. Hadn't opened someone else's mail. It said, "Dear Flying Officer Wells, the RAF will give you your branch change to pilot." I went, oh my God. And then it sort of said, "We are, however, taking you on as a test case to find out how far someone with no aptitude can get before they fail," which was really lovely to get told that you would fail. That was really tough, actually, to be honest, Adam, because they were giving me now the chance of a lifetime, but being told in the small print that you probably won't make it. And that's going to plant this seed of doubt, that would grow and grow. You talk about breeding grounds for imposter syndrome.
Yeah.
That's your classic scenario there, I think.
And with that, like, you've had to overcome adversity just to get in to even follow your dream, and that is something that I wanted to highlight, Mandy, to the listener, because the tenacity that you showed, because a lot of people, as you know, and you've met so many people in the work that you do now as a keynote speaker, so many people hit that adversity and don't seem to, they stop and go, oh, it's not meant to be, and then they totally go, no, can't do it. But you had the tenacity to go, no, this is my dream, I want to do this, and I'll find a way to get to fly jets and do what I absolutely love. So well done on that, because a lot of people would have given up.
Yeah, a lot of people say, oh, it's like a sliding doors moment listening to you, because I do a lot of public speaking now, and they'll often come up and go, oh, it was my dream to be a pilot, but I failed the test, and therefore I ended up doing something else and never went back to it. And I think the big difference perhaps between all of those people that say that to me and myself, and to anyone that has achieved that goal, is purpose. We talk about resilience, and my goodness, you've probably heard the word more than anyone. Oh, it's important to be resilient. Oh, piss off. What is resilience really? To me, it's resilience plus purpose will be a passion, will be your end goal. But there's no point telling me to bounce back, to come back, to do anything if I'm not purpose driven. And it's about having that goal in sight. And more than anyone of that feeling of, this is where I really need to get to, and I'm going to take any small steps to get there. Because sometimes it's not the big ones. It can just be tiny incremental improvements that are positioning you. And in my brain, I heard this lovely quote, and I've used it so often. In fact, I used it in my book, that it's not a stumbling block, it's a stepping stone. And it's a lovely way of reframing those problems, those big challenges, and saying, if I take on that challenge and I get to the top of that little stumbling block, I'm now in a perfect position as a launch pad to the next stage.
Yeah.
And it's so true. And that in itself it doesn't have to be the running of the marathon, but it's the getting off the couch and walking 1 kilometre. Holy moly.
Yep.
That is a celebration,
It is, and the thing that my mentor says to me all the time is those 2mm shifts every day, and I always put it up whenever I do a post or something where I go to the gym and I hit a PB or something, and I go, it's those 2mm shifts, and someone reached out to me and said the other day, what are you talking about, this 2mm shifts daily? And I said, well, each day you're progressing forward. You start small, and then eventually your small steps become massive steps, and then you start and you'll move mountains. And he's like, oh, I get it. I get why you say it. And what you've said is those fundamental little steps, and then momentum grows, and then you're unstoppable.
Do you know what? There's a really lovely flying analogy. It's called the 1 in 30 rule. And if you can imagine, I don't know if you ever heard of this 1 in 30?
I haven't, no. Please explain.
Okay, so if you can imagine you're a pilot and you're flying from A to B, but you get knocked off track and you find out that you are 1 mile off track. Okay. To get back on track in 30 miles time, you have to do a 1 degree correction to get back onto track.
Yep.
So, you're heading north, you've ended up heading and you find yourself like 1 mile just to the east of that track. And you go, okay, to get back to north, I need to be heading the heading of 359. 1 degree to the left of north will take me back. And in 30 miles, I will be back on track. And you could, sorry, sorry, oh my God, it's called a 1 in 60 rule. God, that's how long I'm out of flying. Jesus, it's a 1 in 60 rule. So any pilots out there, I do apologize. I've just talked complete rubbish, but 1 in 60. So basically, yeah, if you're after 30 miles and you're 1 mile off, you would do a 2 degree correction.
Wow.
So in the back of your mind, you're always going 1 in 60, the 1 in 60 rule. And it's the way that geometry would work on that whole dynamics of things. So 1 in 60, and that's exactly like it's the 2 millimeter shift. So
right.
if you're 1 mile off in 60 miles, you'll be back on track.
Yeah, well, there you go. I've learned something. They say every day is a school day, and
Every day's school day.
and I've learned something. So wow, that's
Yeah.
so. Let's get back to you get in now, and you're now in training to become to fly the Tornado. And for people who for the non-military listeners, what is the Tornado?
So Tornado GR4 particularly is probably the equivalent of the F-15 Eagle. So I want you to sort of think you're sort of Top Gun. So in Top Gun there was the F-14, but it's like that sort of size of aircraft. It's a really big beast of an aircraft. For the UK, it's any aircraft that there was going off to fight in a war. They would always show a picture of a Tornado taking off and go, the UK is off to war. And there's this jet taking off. It's got two big afterburners that come out the back. It's got wings that sweep, so you can have them in 25 wing, which is basically looking like like they're really far forward. And then if you sweep them back when you go fast, you become like a paper dart, like a paper aeroplane.
Yeah, right.
So you're really slick. So it's an incredibly capable aircraft. Its job was ground defense and attack, and ours was reconnaissance as well. So it had two roles: ground attack and also reconnaissance. And I was involved in both of those things.
So I'm guessing you mentioned Top Gun, so you watched it as a kid and wanted to be Maverick. Is that what you wanted to be?
Oh God, yeah, absolutely. And in fact, it's great when you watch Top Gun back now, isn't it? Because actually you realise how misogynistic it is throughout it. But
exactly.
you know what? At the time, and this is, I think, do you know what though? This is a really good reflection of life and reflection of culture and how culture has shifted over those 30 years. Let's just be honest. Because, I think it was 1984 when it came out. And the world was a really different place. It was so different, wasn't it?
I wasn't even born. There you go, man.
You weren't even born. No. My God, that makes me feel really old. God, I'm old enough to be your mother or something. But so no, I'm 52 now, and in those days we watched it, we loved it. It was just the way it was, and we have shifted so much to be so much more thoughtful about other people, so much more controlled about how we talk, and thank God we have. My God, things had to change. They did. And it's only when you look back, having, watching, say, Top Gun Maverick, more recently, that you think, yeah, they've done a little hat tribute to the first one, but at the same time, they have moved on. They've got female pilot or female nav in there and all the rest of it. And actually, that's really, really important on the role modeling side of things to have that. But, when you go back, you think, bloody hell, it was so like misogynistic throughout. But that's what the Air Force, that's what the military was like as well. I mean, I'll be honest, it was pretty brutal.
Of course, you joined in 94, so, and you're going into as I said at the start, you're going into a very male-dominated space. And I'll ask you this because you can comment on this. How is Top Gun, is that what it's like? Is that how you fly? Is that really how it is?
Not quite how you fly. I've definitely never broken the rules like he did. There's, you don't tend to do the fly by the towers and all that. But some of the flying scenes, I mean, like the air combat stuff that you're doing, you do have bubbles. What we do is we'd hit height targets. So you'd be separated by 1,000 feet. So if you're doing air combat, for example, training, 2 aircraft will go out or 3 aircraft go out. And if it's a 2v1 fight, and you'll have bubbles. So you'll say, okay, the aggressor is going to be at even numbers. The other person's going to be at odd numbers. You're going to be 1,000 feet separated. The bottom hard deck is 10,000 feet or 5,000, whatever it is, depending on the mountainside. And the tops are going to be this. So you're coming in this corridor of which you know you won't be able to hit the other person. So it's not like you're going in blind, the sun's behind them, and you go, oh my God, I'm suddenly going to hit them. So there's a lot more sort of safety issues. But I mean, the flying scenes of the circular fights and all of those sorts of things, I mean, I'm going to hit the brakes and he's going to fly right by. I mean, we quoted those the whole time we were in training. I mean, why would you not? It's the dialogue of my youth.
Of course. And so talk me through, you get to you go to squadrons, is that right? You get to a squadron, yeah. and how are you received when you get to the squadron? As it's a male dominated workplace that you're going into, and talk me through the training. How long was the training, and do you when are you given here's the keys, Mandy, go and your first flight? When does that happen?
Yeah, so firstly, there are no keys. But yeah. So I joined in 94 and I reached my first squadron in the 98. So November of 98. So I'd been in for 4.5 years. So that's how long the training is, basically. Dependent on how long you need to do what's called holding. So if there's a backlog of pilots going through system, it could be through, I don't know, poor weather, unserviceability of aircraft and things like that. You end up holding and doing other jobs. So I'd be holding occasionally for 9 months, doing an operations job somewhere, and then I'd come back and carry on with my flying training. And so, yeah, it took me about 4.5 years. So similar to becoming a doctor in many ways. Huge expense, about £3 million $6 million to train a pilot to the front line. So huge investiture in you as well. By that stage, you've gone through elementary flying training, which is a small aircraft that would travel at about 120 miles an hour. You then go, for myself, it was onto one called the Tucano, which is a turboprop aircraft, goes at double the speed, 240. Then you fly the Hawk, which is what our Red Arrows would fly. It's a small, very agile training aircraft, a single engine jet with an ejection seat. That will now travel at 420 to 500 miles an hour. So if you can imagine, each stage you're developing, you're doubling your speed and you're halving your height. Double the speed, half your height. So by the time you get to the front line and you're now given a Tornado, this feels massive. But the big difference was, and I remember going out to the Tornado, was that the first flight in a Tornado, first you've done 10 trips in the simulator. So by the time you actually get into it, you are flying this time that we have a few aircraft which are called twin stick aircraft. So for any of the listeners, the Tornado is a 2-person aircraft. You have a pilot in the front seat and a WISO or weapon systems operator. They used to be called navigators. They're in the back seat. And so you're a team. And this was the first time I've also now got a head-up display for the first time with all my green writing. I've also got a moving map, which is telling me exactly where I am first time. Up to now, I've had paper maps in my hand, and I'm looking outside of the cockpit going, where the hell am I? There's a mountain over there. There's a mountain on my map. Am I on the right side of the mountain? So you're doing it all visually and all alone. And when you're in training, you're hitting targets within 5 seconds on the paper map, and controlling a wingman, and ensuring that you're flying as a pair of aircraft at 250 feet with an enemy trying to shoot you down, which is your instructor. So the capacity you need in those final stages of fast jet training is phenomenal. When I look back now, I think, I'm not even sure how I ever did it. Then you get to the Tornado and you've proved you can fly an aircraft. Now it's time to learn how to fight an aircraft. And now you're being given the gift of an aircraft that you're going to go to war in, which is set up to assist you. It's not there to break you, to challenge you. And it's everything in there is saying, let's make it easier for the person to have better situational awareness, more information to enable you to make better quality decisions. And you've got someone else that you're working in a team with. Oh my God, it's like a dream. So actually, by the time you get to the Tornado, it's sort of much easier. And so the Tornado Operational Conversion Unit, I really enjoyed my time on that. Yes, I mean, people do still get chopped at that stage, and they'll go and perhaps fly multi-engine aircraft or helicopters. But actually, the majority of people, once you've proven that you can get to that stage, you tend to get through. And I went through that training, a couple of awful moments where we lost friends on that course, and I can talk you about that afterwards. But I then arrive on my squadron, and if you can imagine, up to now, I have been with the same people for 4.5 years. These are the people I joined the Air Force with. There's been some change in different courses where people have been restreamed or gone off, but there's been this quorum of about 10, maybe 15 of us. And we've gone through every stage sort of together. And then we go to Tornado, and then there were 5 of us, and we are brilliant friends. These guys are like my brothers, is the best way I can describe them. Not just brothers in arms, but they were, you've literally lived, breathed, same space as these people for 5 years. Now I ping out and I go to a squadron, and they'd never had a woman pilot. Now, I didn't know anyone on the squadron. There was one guy that I knew who was sort of like a year ahead of me in training. So I knew sort of him, and, oh, hi there. I sort of knew to say hi. But I didn't know anyone else, and they'd never had a woman. So no one ever spoke about that. It was not like, I'll be honest, society today where we'd go, this is a really big thing. We've got this woman coming on the squadron, let's get the toilet. So she's got a female toilet. Let's make sure we've got a female flying kit. None of that. It was just like they went, well, she's here. Everyone just pretend everything's business as normal. Make no special dispensations for her. Not that you're wanting anything special. And I didn't want anything special. I'd never assumed that I would have anything special. But in some ways, by doing that, I discovered, it was really funny, one of the ground crew I saw not that long ago, and he said, we all had a briefing where we were told, we've got this female pilot coming, when you're strapping her in to the aircraft, you're going to have to be really careful that, you don't touch her in any way. And, and you've got to watch all your language. And they were given this special briefing of, we've got this female pilot coming. And then the first one, this guy, I remembered, he said, I was trying to hand it to you. And I went, oh, just pass it to me. I don't give a shit. And he went, oh, thank God, it's going to be all right. She's not like a precious princess. And then I think he went back and went, she's fine, everyone. Honestly, just treat her normally. And after that, then the banter started, and it was absolutely fine. But it was, it was interesting. I mean, there was the first day, every screensaver is a naked woman. There's Pirelli's, naked women calendars all over the place. There's, as I say, no female flying kit. There's no female toilets. You are entering an all-male environment.
It sounds very similar to our good friend Liz McConney. We're both previous guest on the podcast, episode 78, I think it is. I'm racking my brain.
Oh, good memory, Adam. Yeah. Liz is a great friend of mine.
She's an unbelievable, and she went through exactly the same as you. Chinook, first female Chinook, or longest serving Chinook.
Chinook.
Yeah.
Loadmaster.
So go back and listen to her episode, and it sounds very similar. You both had, and you live right near each other now. So
yeah, we live 20 minutes away, which in Australian terms, literally we're neighbours.
But we do see down the road. Really
yeah, down the road. She popped over and brought me a present for my camper van at Christmas.
She's a beautiful human. It. Yeah, and
so absolutely.
And so you experience this, and like as you say, you've got to become one of the boys. Like essentially, you've got to, but keeping your still keeping that that you are a woman, but you can have a joke with the boys and have a laugh. It's not all serious, like as you said, princess. Like you can still do that as well.
Yeah, it's a really interesting line though, actually. So, gosh. I don't think I'd realised that over those 4 or 5 years I'd morphed. I'd really probably lost a lot of, I was trying so hard to be a boy. You don't realise you're doing it, but you're just doing it to fit in. And I was quite laddie, I was swearing way more. I was drinking way more. I could drink pints as quickly as the rest of them. And I did all of this subconsciously in many ways, just to fit it. I mean, we all do this to some degree, don't we?
Yeah.
We want to be part of this amalgous group, so we lose identity and all the rest of it. But there's a really lovely story that I actually share, and it was when I was on a detachment over in America. We were on a big exercise called Red Flag, and it's a brilliant exercise. They use the Arizona desert as our playing field, and there's this huge big range that we can fly on. And Red Flag is the pinnacle of any pilot's flying career, pretty much, because we had, I think, 8 jets out there. There were about 12 different nations, Spanish, Turkish, everyone comes together and you're put into this massive war zoning game up against the aggressor squadron, which is I basically imagine Top Gun. It's like Top Gun, but for lots of different nations coming together. So the aggressor squadron is made up of the American fighter pilots. Their job is to shoot us down, and they were really good at it. You've also got big command and control aircraft airborne who are all on headsets. They've got all of the displays up, so they're talking different aircraft on. You have got search and rescue scenarios going on with downed air crew. Someone's potentially ejected. We are dropping live weapons as well on ranges. So it's basically the philosophy being, if you're training harder than you're ever going to fight for real, when you go to war, it's going to seem simple compared to this. And that is about what it's about. Now, I was put to fly with a really lovely navigator called Michel Dupont from France. He was really experienced, and it was really powerful. And they will often try to do that in those sorts of exercises, that you have a relatively inexperienced pilot and they'll put them to fly with a very experienced nav or vice versa, because now you're bringing that person up. You're enabling better quality decisions. And it's like a mentor, a meter behind you. But we were going out for dinner one evening, and Michel was a really good looking man, actually. I quite fancied him. I mean, I was with my boyfriend, who I married. I'm still with him now, so there's nothing going on. And he was married, but it was a bit of mild flirtation. It was all a bit funny. And we were going out for dinner. I made an effort. There was 200 other men, by the way. It wasn't just me and Michel. But I arrived in this hotel foyer, and Michel's sort of in there, and I sort of cough loudly, and all these men look up. And Michel and my eyes met, and he went, "Oh, Mandy," this is a French accent, by the way, Adam, just to be clarity, I'm not good at accents, so just go with me on this one. I won't do an Aussie one.
Of course.
He said, "Oh, Mandy, you're looking beautiful this evening." At which point, someone next to him playfully hits him across the head and said, "You can't say that to Mandy. She's one of the boys." And he just looked back and he had this Gaelic French shrug and he said, "Oh, you Brits, you still have so much to learn about women." And it was this moment in time whereby everyone was roaring with laughter, because everyone saw me as being one of the boys, and I'd been trying to be one of the boys. But there's this gulf between fitting in, which is what I was doing, where I was never really bringing my true self to work, and belonging. Now, belonging is where we are getting to now. It's when we say, you know what, this is me. I'm going to stop shrinking. I'm going to stop changing who I am to fit in, and I'm going to start radiating and shining as who I am now. As the red-haired young man that you were, that constantly tried to change, to just try to stay above board, stay above water. It's hard. And when we're pretending, you're never going to get someone's true performance. No. Are you?
And really, it's tiring. And you, in the end, you go, like, I can't keep doing this. Like, I'm putting on a facade, and it's like, how long can you keep the facade up? And then eventually you work out who you are. And I have now, and like, I know I know who I am. And you and I have spoken about this at length for the podcast. And that's it. You work out who you are. And any young person out there that listens to this, if you know that it's not you, walk away. And just be you, and don't think that you're, it's okay to be different. You can be different. Like, Mandy, you and I, we're different people. Like and it's okay. It's an okay thing. Yeah.
Absolutely. And, the amount of young people. So like this evening, for example, I'm speaking to about 90 in person, and it's going out to all of the air cadet squadrons in the wing. So all of the London West area. And the one thing I always say is, ultimately, we are all different. Every single person in life is different. That is guaranteed, because there is no blueprint. And so, to survive at school, we morph, and then we get into a job and we survive in the job by morphing. And now more and more, people are hearing, and younger people are hearing this from a younger age, it's okay to be yourself. So do you know what? I was the sporty girl. In today's money, I would probably be, in those days I was called a tomboy. That's what we used to call them, tomboy. I always wore tracksuits. I loved getting muddy. I was really happy to go on night exercises and smear camouflage paint all over my face and crawl through the mud. Delighted. Me, happiest zone. A tomboy. Nowadays, what I worry about is that if I had been born in today's world, would I therefore be thinking I should be a man? And this is what worries me a little bit, is
Yeah.
that, you know, it's almost like at a very young age. I am really happy being a woman. I love being a woman.
Mm,
I really do. But I think it's too easy what to think, I like sport, I'm sporty, I'm this, I'm that, perhaps I'm gay. Should I be a man? And the answer is no, not necessarily.
mm,
Give it time to work out who you are,
mm,
in your own skin, to grow a little, and then you'll work out who you are.
mm,
Not to do anything too dramatic too early. I think it's too easy in some ways just to get caught in this bandwagon where you think, actually, I'm just going to change, I'm going to do this, I'm going to do
mm,
that. But actually, just sit with who you are
mm.
and recognize, it's okay to be the sporty one. It's okay to be the tomboy. It's okay to want to wear boys' clothes because they're more comfy in their tracksuits. Guess what?
Mm.
My sons have grown up living in tracksuits. No one's saying to them, maybe you should be something you shouldn't. That's fine. They're comfy. Let's be
Exactly.
honest.
Exactly. And
You know,
you can balance it by, you can do all those sort of things and still, as a female, be femmy and, have your nails done and
of
wear
course
your
you
heels, and
can.
you can do all of that. You just, it's
Yeah,
it's what you like. It's like myself. I like going and doing ice baths. Some people hate them. I love them. I
yeah.
love what they do for
And
me. And
yeah,
you say that, but I love them. Like that,
yeah.
what they
My
do.
son loves them. My
Yeah.
son loves the ice bath. He's trying to get me to get one in the garden. I'm like, we've got a really small garden. Where are we putting it? He's
Yeah.
like, take the bike shed out. Take the bike shed out and put an ice bath in.
But that's the
But, yeah,
thing. Like whatever, and this exactly to your point. Whatever works for you and whatever makes you feel good and inside, do it. Like, if that's
yeah,
what you want to do, do it. And as you said,
yeah,
I think there's so much noise in society around the world now of you've got to be this or you've got to be this label or you've got to be that, and you don't. Just sometimes just take a minute, take a breath, and go, actually, no, I'm okay. I can do this, and yeah, look, we could speak on that for hours, but I won't because I
yeah.
know I know we haven't got hours. We will get back to you and your flying, and that's probably a discussion for you and me when we've got just off
Yeah,
air.
sure.
You and yeah, and
Yeah, but I do think it's an interesting one. So yeah, so my
of
advice to
course,
anyone listening is it's recognize the strength in you.
mm,
It's okay to be you. It
yeah,
is okay to be you, and it's okay to sit with who you are for a while.
mm,
Because you know what? But I'll tell you something that was really interesting, Adam, was
of
that when I
course,
started to recognize how far I had morphed away from who I was, and then I started to go, actually, do you know what? I'm really unhappy. I need to be more me. When I started to be more me, it gave permission for all the guys on my squadron to be more them, because I don't think they'd realised that they too were morphing away from perhaps being intrinsically who they are, which might have been a softer character. They too were trying to be part of this testosterone filled
mm,
alpha male, atypical. This is what a fighter pilot squadron member should be like.
yep.
And this ripple effect created cultural change on the squadron. And it took like a year and then a year later. And actually, that squadron, when I left it, was in a really different place culturally than when I arrived on it.
Well, that you know what that says it all. That it often is that where you just need that little bit of change, and that it changes for the better, and it
Yeah.
obviously did. And I want to go forward. So you do your exercise over in the US, then you come back, and then I want to talk to you about a day that I talk to every veteran about is September 11. What do you remember of September 11? And did you think that you would then, a year later, be deployed overseas and actually fighting at the war on terror?
Yeah, so for myself, actually, it sits really nicely into that last story I was telling, because we were on the way back from Red Flag. So we'd been on the exercise. We were coming back. We were doing air-to-air refueling over the middle of the Atlantic, actually, right in the middle between obviously America and the UK. And we were in thick cloud at the time, and we were behind an aircraft which is full of fuel, and it has this hose hanging at the back, and it has a basket on it, and all the pilot has to do in the back in the following aircraft is basically extend a probe, and you put your probe into this moving basket. So it's quite a stressful environment, especially in thick cloud, to do this. And we were doing this, and so sort of you can see that tension is running quite high. And then we heard suddenly that America had shut their airspace. And the date is 9/11, and we are literally in the middle of the Atlantic. And we had no idea what's happened. I mean, we couldn't even process this. How do you make decisions when you don't have the facts? Nightmare. And so we talk a lot in the military about controlling the controllables. And if you can't, let it go. And this is a brilliant analogy for life. So the stress bucket is just filling up with superfluous issues all the time. And yet so much of what is stressing us is completely outside of our capability. We have no ability to change geopolitical, global things. And yet we watch the news, we hear this, we did, and it's stressing us out, and our bucket's getting fuller and fuller and fuller and fuller. And now we have no capacity to make any sort of decisions. So if we just go right back to basics, go fly the aeroplane. What is within my sphere of influence in this moment of time? What knowledge, what information do I need with the resources I have? Well, we realise that we're in thick cloud. Every aircraft is being turned back. Every aircraft is being diverted. There is chaos on the airwaves. No one knew what to do. And so we just started to scan the airspace using our air-to-air radars now just to clear our passageway. Because what's my biggest threat in this scenario is hitting another aeroplane, having a blue on blue. And so we got over to the UK. And as we approached the UK, we then hear the next radio call from an American ship. It was on an exercise just off the south coast of the UK. And it's a big American aircraft carrier. There's a 5 nautical mile exclusion zone around the ship, a small propeller aeroplane. It happens to be on a sightseeing tour. It's a dad and his children and wife on board. They're flying on the south coast. They're actually, unbeknownst to them, about to fly into the zone of the American ship. The American ship believed it was terrorists. They are now loading live weapons and they are about to shoot this aircraft down. So this is now panning out in real time, and we are airborne over the UK now at about 30,000 feet, and we're hearing this going on. And we suddenly realised that we were the nearest airborne assets potentially. And we said to air traffic control, what can we do to assist? They just went, oh my God, gave us radar vectors. We just literally pulled out the airway, dived down to height. And as we're approaching, fortunately, before we get there, we didn't actually have to get onto their wing. That would have been really scary, but we were trying to reach them on the emergency channel. We got through on the emergency channel and they changed their course. They had a matter of minutes to run and they would have been shot down. And then we got back to the squadron. We walked into the squadron building, still with no understanding, by the way, what's happened. And we see the Twin Towers just collapsing. And I don't think we even remembered to sign our jets in. We all just stood there in horror, seeing this awful vision. Mm. And then that did change our future, because it was within a matter of months, actually, we were then posted out to Iraq. I would then spend pretty much we were over there for a period of about 3.5 years, going on like rolling 3 to 4 monthly detachments. You'd go out, you'd come back for a bit, you'd go back out, you'd come back. And we had 8 jets deployed out in Kuwait, defending the no-fly zone actually in the build-up to Gulf War II.
Mm. And so talk me through that, because your life changes and it changed for every single veteran that I've ever had on the podcast that day. And you're now deployed in a war zone that your mindset changes, because this is for real. And the risk, as you know, as flying, and I do because I winch in and out of helicopters for work. So I understand the risk that, mechanical but you're now going to a war zone that you could be shot down. That mindset changes for you, but you, as you said at the start of the podcast, that purpose, that passion to, as you're watching those buildings collapse, those innocent people losing their lives. Talk me through that mindset and that first time you were deployed over to Iraq.
Yeah, so you're excited. This sounds crazy. What a ridiculous comment to make, but you've just trained for 4.5 years to do this job. And finally you're being picked for the team. That is how you feel. It's not that you're bloodthirsty. It's not that you are sitting there going, I want to go to war, I want to kill people. That is not in your agenda at all. But you want to do the job that you have trained for. And it's like you've been sitting on the sidelines of a football team for years and years and years, and finally you're going to go and get the job, which is going to be to play in the A team. And we deployed, and of course it's quite scary out there. Suddenly you're in a very hot desert that's very different flying. We'd fortunately just done, this is why you do the training in Red Flag in Las Vegas from Arizona, because guess what? The desert out there is similar to the desert out in the Middle East. And so at least you're used to that sort of environment and those temperatures, because there's only so much practicing you can do in the green and pleasant lands of the UK when you're perhaps training for a war zone in the Middle East. So this is why we have to train in the environments, which is why we sometimes come over to Oz, and we do big exercises over in Australia as well. Anyway, so we deploy out there, and my very first mission was a bombing mission. So predominantly out there, what we were doing was reconnaissance. So we were the eyes in the skies. We would have troops on the ground. We would have reconnaissance pods strapped to our aircraft. We would be flying over targets. We'd be taking photos, digital imagery as well, downloading them to troops on the ground to give them that bird's eye perspective. But on this occasion, on my very first mission over there, I just arrived on the squadron actually, and I was told it was going to be a bombing mission. And I was sort of like, apparently my eyes went rather wide, like the rabbit that you're about to kill in the spotlight when you're driving down the country roads. And yeah, and that was how the guy described it. He said, yeah, he stood there and he watched me go, oh, wow. Now, again, all the training you've done is leading to this point. And I was flying with this, another senior nav, and we do the planning. Now, what you have is different levels of priority. So we have RO1, RO2, response option 1, 2, and 3. Now, ours was an RO3 target, i.e. it's not high priority. There is to be no civilian collateral damage whatsoever. This is how they'll frame it, So basically, if it's a priority 1 target, the aim is you've got to find the target, you've got to destroy it, because there's potential loss of life if you don't. Now, ours was a huge gun emplacement called AAA, and they were using these gun emplacements to shoot up. These can shoot up to 30,000 feet, so it's not just like a small gun. These are huge guns. And basically, this was our target, and we went on the mission. And within a few minutes, as we're going towards the target, my navigator's just going, I'm not breaking out of the desert, Mandy. So he's got all of the imagery in the back seat. I am flying on the track, on the target, on the exact run that we've planned, which would put me over the target, and he can't see it. And so he's sweeping in using all of his, we had TIAL, thermal imaging airborne laser designator. So he's using all of this technology, and he's not being able to break out the actual gun emplacement, because of course they're camouflaged, they're covered, they're hidden in berms, with big walls around them and all these sorts of things. And within 30 seconds, he said, we're not dropping, Mandy. I can't find it. That's fine. You just pull off the target and you come home. And I was like, have I messed up? Have I done something wrong? He said, no. This happens, Mandy. Don't worry. You did everything right. We just can't find it. So it's a really interesting power switch, because people always think it's about the pilots. And of course, the pilots have got a lot of training. But ultimately, this team that you've got up there, you could argue the pilot is just a taxi driver to get the nav, the weapon systems operator, to the right point in the sky to do their job. And that's really how it was out there, because this was a high-level war for us. We were flying in the 20 to 25,000 feet bracket. So it wasn't like Afghanistan, where aircraft were down in the weeds. And when you look at mental health issues that have come out of different conflicts, there's been a lot more issues for people in low-level environments for pilots, where you're sort of seeing the whites of your eyes, you're seeing the consequences of your actions much quicker. For ourselves at 20,000 feet, you're in your office, but there's a feeling of displacement from it. I was in such a different place to, say, Liz Chinook Kruchik, who was in the battle, actually immersed on the battlefield.
Yeah.
She is seeing day in, day out the effects of war. She's putting down covering fire. She's taking on, dead bodies that she's, loading into the back of the Chinook. It's horrific.
Oh, it is.
That was so different to ours, which was you're getting airborne, you're going to sit in an air-conditioned office at 20,000 feet, and you are very, very using precision technology to drop precise weapons on GPS and laser guided. And that feels really different, by the way.
Absolutely it does, because as you say, you've absolutely hit the nail on the head there with the description of Liz's on the ground and those close quarter, dropping the ordnance, very close, and you're 20,000. So you sort of, you're in it, but you're not, if that makes sense, if you know what I'm
Yeah,
trying to say.
absolutely. Now, that's when, if you get shot down, that's when it becomes a huge issue. And I do have friends, there's two friends of mine, John Peters and John Nichols, who were shot down in Gulf War One and taken prisoner of war. And I talked to them, and that displacement of going, I'm in the office,
Mm,
to I'm on the ground is massive.
mm,
It's massive. If you're like in a helicopter, you're in the battlefield already.
yeah,
And so they're sort of seeing how it's all operating. I mean, there was one mission that I can talk you through actually,
of
which was
course,
a
yeah.
very different one when we were tasked. Actually, this was not my first time out there. Now I'm a couple of tours in. President Bush Jr. had just taken over being president in the US, and they were about to get all of their fiber optics, all of their technology was about to go underground in Iraq. So we were about to lose all of our intelligence, which was being picked up for overground comms. Suddenly it's going underground. We're going to lose all of our intel. And so our job was to destroy a fiber optics hub just to the south of Baghdad. Now, up to this point, we've been going up to what's called the 33rd parallel in Iraq. So we weren't allowed to go any further north than that. Suddenly, this is right up north. This is way higher than that. And we're going, bloody hell, this is a big mission. I was going off it was a 4-ship. We were in the back pair of the 4-ship, and I was number 3. I was laser designator. So it was what's called a cooperative attack. So a friend of mine, who I'm seeing actually in a couple of weeks' time, he was going to be dropping the weapon, and it would be released on a GPS coordinate. And then right at the very final stages, it picks up my laser energy, which is going to guide it into a door of the building. And then there's a fuse delay on the weapon that wouldn't say, it doesn't just go bang when it hits something. It goes bang on a delay when it's gone into the basement, which is where the fiber optics are all kept. So in some ways, when we talk about precision munitions, this is not just like mass bombing. This is one weapon that is going in to infiltrate a basement of a bit. So we look at what's the constitution of the building. Is it concrete? Is it brick? Those are all factors that will go into the weapon choice that we're going to use. So, there's a lot of skill that goes into this. You have weapon systems experts on the squadrons that will help you with that as well. Anyway, so we're on the mission, we head north, and my navigator went, oh my God, it's like 10 o'clock at night, it's pitch black. He said, are your night vision goggles up or down, Mandy? And you wear these very heavy bits of kit on the front of your helmet, and you can click them up so you can just see the ambient lighting will light up. Or you click them down and it's going to pick up any tiny millilux levels of light and it will amplify them. So now we're going to see in the dark. And I said, they're up. And he goes, Jesus, leave them that way. And I went, no, obviously not. You've told me to not do something. So I'm like a toddler, dunk, click them down. I'm like, holy shit. Now we are seeing tracer rounds coming up. We're seeing surface-to-air missiles literally launching. But one thing that was really interesting, Adam, was that they seemed to be launching indiscriminately. It didn't seem that they were it was almost like we're under threat. So we're going to respond by putting as much munitions in the air to scare people. But it wasn't like measured targeting. So on our radar homing and warning receiver, which is a piece of kit that we have in the Tornado, we get a little spike which is telling us where a missile system is looking at on the ground, and then it tells us if there's a missile in the air that's going to be targeting you, and you get different tags to tell you what is looking at you. And we weren't getting any of those, so we could sort of see them on the ground, but nothing was highlighting us. So there was a slight sense of, this is pretty dangerous stuff, but at the same time, let's press on. And we just carried on. We got to the target, and it went clinically to perfection. We lased the target. The weapon was released from the other aircraft, and it went in. We pull off. We come home. When we got back home, it was really interesting. We walked into the squadron building, and we heard from an American. He said, guys, were you Spartan formation? We said, yeah, we were. He said, oh my God, I've got the most amazing footage of your weapon release. Do you want to see it? We were like, well, actually, it's not often you see it from a different perspective. You've got all of your videotapes where we will absolutely analyze our performance afterwards. Did you have a direct hit? Could we consider that? Is it damaged or is it destroyed? All of those sorts of things will go through on your imagery, as well as on satellite imagery as well. And he said, come and have a look. And they've had an unmanned aerial vehicle, a drone now. It had been positioned directly above our target, and it had filmed the whole thing. And you see a man, and he basically walks out the back door of the building, and he's got a cigarette in his hand and a hot cup of tea or drink. He smokes his cigarette and then he finishes his tea and he throws a bit on the floor because we're looking at this now through infrared. So this patch on the floor is bright white, and his cigarette you can see is burning bright white. Throws it down, he leaves the cigarette burning as you can see it, and this hot drink. He shuts the door. At the exact moment when he shuts the door, our weapon goes into the other side of the building, and you see the whole building go boom and then back down again like that. And all 8 of us went, because now we're seeing firsthand, and I know this sounds crazy, but it's not often we actually see it to that level. And then the door opens and the bloke walks out. He runs out, actually. Thank God he'd had his keys for his car in his pocket. He runs out and he gets straight into his vehicle and he just drives it in a straight line. He doesn't reverse out of the car parking slot. He drives it straight forward into a fence line. And he pulls this fence line, and we can see there's this fence posts. And as he's driving, they're going ping, ping, ping. And he is now driving through the desert, dragging all these fence posts and this fence line with him through the desert to get as far as he can away from this bomb that's gone off. He must have been protected because he was in the door frame. Oh my God. And if you can imagine this collective one, we all went, oh.
Yeah.
Because we're not bloodthirsty. You're not there because you want to kill anybody. You're there because you have been given a job to do, and very clinically you are going to do that job. And that there's an absolute line in the sand. None of us are risk takers. None of us want to do stuff that we feel uncomfortable with. But at the same time, you will be pushed outside your comfort zone. Of course you will. And you will do things that you think, am I really happy with that? But one thing I can put my hand on my heart and say is, the rules of engagement we have in a war zone are so strict. I had other target runs where we didn't drop because there was a man and a camel. And again, it was a lower level target and we didn't have to drop on it. So we didn't.
And you highlight exactly those, that's life, isn't it? Like really we're pushed to outside of our comfort zones, and you're going to do things that you didn't think you would do, but as you say, those rules of engagement. And what I loved about that, Mandy, was as you said, you're not bloodthirst. You're doing your job. You're tasked with a mission, and I've never heard that before. Where no, off target, because there's a man there. There's a man with a camel. Like that's and that's rules of engagement. They are written in black and white that you cannot engage. And civil, as you've seen, Mandy, and as many other veterans who listen to this podcast, civilian casualties it occurs, but you all as military personnel, you want to take that risk away. You don't want to harm civilians, and unfortunately, wars, as wars are very dirty, and and unfortunately, innocent people do get killed. But those rules of engagement are there for a reason.
Yeah, they are absolutely.
So I know where I'm looking at the time going, I'm looking going, oh, yeah, it's not your fault. It's not your fault at all. I just know that we're pressed for time. And I just want to touch on a few things before we wrap it up. And it's just, I could talk to you for hours. If I had the chance, I would talk to you for hours, but we don't have that. But I want to talk to you throughout your career and the challenge of becoming a mum and still trying to maintain this job that you love. How hard was that to balance being a mum and being the wife of, as you said, a husband who serves as well? How did you balance all of that?
Bloody brutal. I don't think there is any balance. I think you call it blend now, I think, because you know what, you can't have it all. And I just think there's going to be something that gives. And for me, always knew I wanted to be a mum. I married Craig, who was in the Navy. He then left in 2000 and became an airline pilot. And, I wanted to have children. So I did have 2 boys. They're now 22 and 21. My 21-year-old has arrived in Sydney this week.
Very good.
Oh, yes. He's been enjoying the highlights of Sydney, and he's currently on Bondi Beach and informing us daily of what he's been up to. So that's fun. So he's getting a job out there. But, it's a really interesting one. So it's tough. It's really, really tough. So I did have to make some sacrifices, and the sacrifice that I made, sadly, was to basically give up my flying career. I kept a job in the Air Force, but I took a job that a Tornado pilot had to do. It was looking after all of the aircraft document set. It sounds really boring, but it was perfect for me as a mum of a 4-month-old baby and a 21-month-old toddler. I could go to work, go back to work, and I could do a job that was really important to do. But at the same time, it was 9 to 5 and it was Monday to Friday and it was non-deployable. But I was told if you do the job, you'll never be promoted. That is a sacrifice I will have to take because I want to be a mum. And I wanted to bring those children up as well. I didn't want to just have my children and then send them off to boarding school. So when I then hit my natural point to leave, which was my 38th birthday, the children are now sort of 6 and 7. They're sort of at school. Actually, it felt like a natural point for me to leave. And it was the right thing to do. And then I trained to be a commercial pilot. I got all my licenses, but my husband was also doing that. And I thought, in this moment of reality, how the hell's this going to work? It's not a normal job. You do get delays, you do get diverted. What we're going to do is say, oh, sorry, can't get the school run today. We're both in Malaga or something, So I thought this is going to be a nightmare. And that's when actually a very fortuitous conversation came up at a dinner party about going into the world of speaking. And I was really lucky. I've always enjoyed storytelling, and someone said, and I was telling a story, not the story I've told tonight actually or today, but the story I was telling was about a mission where we were shot at in Iraq, and he said this will make a brilliant conference story about leadership and about decision making under pressure, about risk. And I said, really? And they went, yeah, honestly, it'd be great. And he gave me my first gig, a guy called Harvey. And I did this speech. I was terrible. I mean, I did it on bloody cards. It was absolutely horrific. It was 12 years ago now. And really from that moment onwards, I got into the world of speaking. And, at that stage, 12 years ago, there weren't that many really strong female speakers. And there's lots more now, actually. It's been a real growth industry. But it's been an amazing one for myself to be involved in because, no conferences happen in the school holidays. You don't get to speak at schools in the school holidays. And so actually I'd found a career that would work around the children that actually meant I could be there in the wraparound time. And most conferences don't happen overnight, Okay, I do now a lot more after dinner and a lot more global ones. But in those days, I would take the ones where I could be back, at home when I needed to be. And so I found the balance. And that business has grown as they've got older and older, and especially post-COVID, the first book went out, my career just went boom, and now the second book's come out, which I've written with my husband, which was, my first book was An Officer, Not a Gentleman. The second one was And Her Gentleman.
Congratulations, being a fellow author. So congratulations.
Fellow author.
Yes.
Yeah. It's been good to do that, to be honest, Adam. And I've really enjoyed that. So no, it's been a great circle.
And I just want to quickly go back to your last flight. What was that like?
It was brilliant. I mean, in some ways, it was tinged with sadness. I'd found out I was pregnant whilst I was on a squadron, and I then miscarried. So I was grounded once I found out I was pregnant, and then I miscarried the baby because I didn't know I was pregnant and I'd kept on flying. So getting hit in the stomach with a G suit is probably not conducive to keeping a baby. And then so once I then lost my first child, I then was back to flying, and I was asked, would I like to carry on flying, or would I like to move into the job that they had penciled me in for anyway? And I said, actually, it'd be sensible, I think, to move across. And so now I at least got my last flight, and it was an epic 3-hour air-to-air refueling, bombing ranges, formations, everything all over the whole of the UK. It was amazing.
That's good. You could go out the way you wanted. And we were talking about the last time that you had your last flight, and you said it was amazing and you knew that it was time to move on. And there's a few questions that I just want to finish the podcast with before we wrap it up. And leadership can be a lonely place, and you have been in leadership positions. And what lessons did you take away from your time of being in the military and being around your good leaders, bad leaders that you have taken forward in your life?
Yeah, so I think the big one for myself would always be about role modeling. So the leaders that I've worked with that I admire, they've always role modeled exactly what they say they would do. So you so often see leaders that say one thing and then they act in a different way. So it's those sort of core values that are really, really important to me. They live their own story as they want others to see them as well. So there's not this stopgap between what's on the wall and what's being actually, acted upon. So I think that role modeling is really, really important as well. And the other thing that I would say is those excellent leaders are people that surround themselves with people who are potentially better than themselves, and they're not fearful of that being a threat to them. They see that as being a positive, because then they can utilize all of that collective power of thought to actually come up with better solutions as well. So I think the leaders that worry that they'll be found out, that they're not as good as they think, we can't ever profess to have all the answers ourselves. And so I think surrounding ourselves with people that have got different perspectives, and that you are really able to embrace that and see that as a real positive. And it shows a little bit of vulnerability at times. And I think that's really important to show as a leader as well.
Absolutely, and I know it myself. Being a crew leader, the biggest thing that I've learned is you include your crew in everything, Mandy. Like you run your idea past them, and then they might suggest something, and you go, "Oh, I didn't think of that," and that's being a good leader. And I've learned too. I would never ask my crew to do something that, one, I wouldn't do myself, or I haven't done in the past. And you're right. You see a lot of, you would have seen it in the military, and we've seen it in life, both of us, where there's good leaders and then there's good managers, and there's a big difference between those two things.
Yeah, there are. And actually, when you do talk about what's the difference between management and leadership, so I always think there's a lovely little diagram almost where you can imagine it, whereas management can keep on managing the system that we're in, and we can keep on going round and round that circle, but leadership will take you to a different circle. And that's the difference, is that the management is the process, the day-to-day running, but the leadership is the inspired vision to actually achieve something greater than what we were achieving before.
And I think too, it's another thing that I'll add in there, Mandy, is when you've got leadership and you've got the whole team that's on purpose, and that's what the military and first responders do so well compared to corporate or general life, because you've got a mission, you've got a purpose,
Yeah.
you've got passion, you've got purpose, and you've got direction, and everyone is going in that same direction.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And I think some would argue, well, yes, it's quite easy though, surely, with first responders, with the military, because you have got a really obvious purpose, in the battle, it's to do this, it's to do, but ultimately, if you think about businesses and how they are running it, that's just why that strategy is so important. It is why it's so important to share the goals, give the breakdown, how are we going to achieve them, and it's not just this is our overarching principle, whatever it is, and it's a bit woolly. You need that you can go to every single person within that organization and say, what is your purpose to achieve the combined goal of this company? So if you are working in admin, it is not so that I can do the admin. That's the management bit. The leadership story would be in order to the goal for the business.
Exactly right. And yeah, I think that's where, and you would see it now because you've now gone into, you're a keynote speaker, and businesses get you in and corporations get you in to talk, and you would see and give talks on leadership, and you would see the difference being with the military and also our first responders is there just seems to be that, and I'll say this, Mandy, I'll openly say this, that a business like a corporate business, they're not doing what first responders and veterans, military personnel do, where if we make a mistake, it's life and death for us. It's not, in corporate, it's not necessarily, you might get a paper cut. Like, that's the biggest thing and paper cuts hurt. They really do, but it's not life and death like it is in the military or in the first responder sense.
Yeah, no, absolutely, Adam.
So looking back now, you served your country for 24 years. Looking back now, and all that you've been through, Mandy, was, apart from marrying your husband and having your children, was joining the military still the best decision you've made, looking back now?
Yeah, absolutely. Career-wise, without a doubt. I love my time in the military, and I do think I do think I'm very lucky, by the way, that I can look back and I do reflect that, a lot of people have gone through the military and they might have had a great time, but it has had a huge effect on their mental health. As you know, and we've had this conversation about this as well. And I've got lots of friends that have come out, you know, very, very mentally scarred.
Mm.
I think I got away with it. I don't mean that in a flippant way at all. And I certainly don't underestimate how sort of lucky I am that actually the action that I saw, the operational service that I saw, and also how I was treated as well. A
Mm.
lot of people, I've got friends that are now describing some, pretty misogynistic behavior. There was one incident of bullying, but that's one incident in a 17-year of active service.
Yeah.
The majority of my time was incredibly positive. And I did have a great fun time, a great career, and I would still recommend it to anybody, to any young person. I think what you learn about yourself, but also about being part of a team and the camaraderie is absolutely second to none.
And you're right. You mentioned, we mentioned earlier on the podcast, Liz, and, the difference
Mm.
in that, her experiences in combat are very different to your experiences. And as you said, and you weren't flippant in, as you said, that like you got away with it, and it's just a different type of, it's as you say, like you
Yeah.
were, as you said, you were thousands of feet above the air, as Liz was right on the ground. So there is
Yeah.
that difference, and there are others out there that have had, and as you say, there are some that have had different careers, but as you said, it's a distinguished career that you have had, and yeah, it's set you up for where you've gone to and moving forward into the future.
Yeah, absolutely. And I certainly wouldn't have had the second career I've had it not been for the first.
No,
So,
that's
yeah.
right, exactly. And Mandy, what advice would you give to females out there that are thinking they listen to this podcast, they read your books, and they go, "Well, I want to do what Mandy did. I want to be the best. I want to get into, a fighter pilot, like become a fighter pilot." There are sacrifices and things along the way. What advice would you give to them?
I would say, to coin the phrase, follow your dream, follow your heart. And I really would. So I get a lot of young people coming up to me. I did a session just the other night, actually. There was a 16-year-old who put her hand up and said, I literally want your career. I want to be a fast jet pilot. What on earth do I do? And would you recommend it? And I was like, I can't recommend it enough. And I just think I love the fact that there are young people out there that are saying, this is what I want to do. And I always say, go back to my mum's point of, why shouldn't it be me? Yes, it's competitive. Yes, there are sacrifices, but the rewards are also amazing that you're doing a phenomenal career, job, which is going to challenge you. There's risk. It's every day is different. If you ask me to go to work and sit in an office day in, day out for 25 years, I couldn't do it. I couldn't think of anything I'd like to do less. That would fill me with pure and utter horror. So actually going to work and being active. And I think, it is about chipping away at this like, the enormous dream and saying, okay, what can I do? What is, I'm 16. What can I do at the age of 16? Well, you can join youth organizations. You can step up at school to leadership positions. You can, try to do extracurricular things that might fit in with that so that, when you're then now 18, you've already starting to get this lovely little CV behind you of all the things that you've done, so that when you then get to be 20 or 21 and want to actually be able to apply, you've now got some of the skills that we need. Things like leading a sports team. That is phenomenal. You want to show resilience? Yeah, turning up day in, day out in horrible weather to go and play rugby for a team, at 9 o'clock on a Sunday morning. I did it for 7 years. Well, that shows me grit and resilience. In foul weather, you turned up day in, day out. And not only did you do that, you led the team, you stepped up, you learned those skills. And you're also learning those skills of resilience and how to fail, because in sport, you don't always win. And so I do think sport is a fantastic way to build up that resilience of the fact that, it's emotional when you lose. You're going to cry. Yeah. And my son was a classic example of that. He started to get this strategy at the age of about 6 or 7. And I could never understand. He'd be playing rugby and he'd be like the star on the pitch. And then he would click that they were about to lose this match. And it was like within about 3 or 4 minutes of the end, he would do a tackle and then he'd burst into tears and say, I'm injured, and get taken off. And it kept on happening, like right before the end, only when they were about to lose. And it was because he's a really emotional being. And at the age of 6, 7, 8ish, he didn't know he was doing that, but he was coming up with a strategy where he could release his emotion by crying because he was injured, not because they were losing. So that by the time they went to lose, he could almost be, I'm fine now. I've got that emotion out of my system, so now I can go and shake the hands, and I've got this, a strategy in place. But he wouldn't have known he was doing it, but my God, what a clever strategy.
Absolutely. Yeah, and I played football over here, so soccer to our Australian listeners, but Mandy knows what I'm talking about, football over in England, and
absolutely.
you have to learn and I said it to a friend's daughter the other day where she was like, and she lost it was actually a card game, and she carried on, and I said, "Hey," I said, you've got to learn to be a good loser too. Like you don't always win in life, and there's a lot of times that you don't win, and you have to. And that's what team sport. That's what team sport's so great is. And in life, as you know, there is always a winner and a loser, and you learn from your losses, and you learn, okay, well, how do I get better? And then that's what it does. And you said it throughout, like as you said throughout the podcast, Mandy, you didn't get through first time. You actually had to overcome that adversity and go back, retry, and then finally get through. That is what you're talking about, is that, like if you're a young person that says, well, how do I get Mandy's career? Well, you're going to have setbacks along the way, but you just got to keep, and you'll find a way. If it's meant to be, you will find a way and get to where your dream is.
Yeah, I heard a lovely analogy, which I use now all the time. They're not stumbling blocks, they're stepping stones. So every time you hit that, what feels like a block in front of you, if you just try and reframe it into your own mind and go, how can I make that my launch pad for the next bit? And a really great example of that was I was playing a badminton tournament, and we'd been playing for 2 whole days. And my partner and I were exhausted. We got to the final and we lost. And I remember now, Alison and we burst into tears and we sobbed so that the people who had beaten us in the final apologised to us for beating us. I came off the court and my mum said, if you ever behave like that again, I will literally disown you. That was the most embarrassing thing. Now, we had done brilliantly to get the silver medal. We'd done 2 days of giving it our absolute hearts. But she said, and we were about 14, it wasn't like we were little girls, we were teenagers. And it was the fact that we were both so tired and we'd given everything, and then we lost. But that bad loser is something that you cannot do. Reframe it and go, you know what? I learned about losing from that. And it was my mum just said, I'm never going to watch you in another match if you ever behave like that. And I did it in tennis as well. And I realised that I used to get so emotional playing tennis. I'd throw my racket. And then suddenly at the age of about 15, I went, no more. Never behave like that again when you lose. And I never really have done, and you could say it's not because you're not competitive. It's just that you've learned a strategy to say, do you know what? I'm not going to get so upset and so emotional about that actually I'm going to behave inappropriately.
No, definitely. And John McEnroe comes to mind there.
Oh, yeah. John and I had a
be
lot
serious.
in common. I was that person, I tell you, it's embarrassing.
Oh, wow. And that's exactly right. And Mandy, you have served through the military. You've seen throughout the years women, the people that came, the women that were before you, yourself, and now the women of today. Do you feel that women in the military get the recognition that you deserve for your service and sacrifices? And I know here in Australia there is a bit of a gap. What's it like over in the UK?
I think we do. Yeah, I can't really think there's, but still a real mismatch in how many women are serving.
Mm.
So, I mean, let's look at women fast jet pilots on the front line. I think there's one female flying in the
Wow.
UK. I mean, it's appalling still. So, yeah, we're making this case, we're doing this, and I've been doing it now for 12 years. So hopefully some of the people I'm actually speaking to are starting to come through the system. But I do think that we do get the recognition, yes. And I do think that we are still championing. But I think that when we talk about recognition, the one thing that is slightly off is that, you know what, we will have had to work harder to get there.
Of course.
And that will not be accepted, because you'll have people that say, yeah, well, it's easy for you because you were a woman. In what way was it easier? I might have stood out, but the spotlight was always therefore going to
Mm,
be on you as one of the only women.
mm,
So yeah, people will remember you, but they've got to remember you for the right reasons, not for the wrong reasons.
mm. Well,
So
I
that is,
think here in Australia, I think Mandy, I think the figures are about 8% of women are serving now.
yeah,
So and that has not changed. That's sort of stayed sort of the same for a long period of time, and it is. And when I spoke to Liz, and she said that she was the first Chinook
yeah.
crew chick, and there has been others now, so that is happening. But as you've just said, there's only one female fighter pilot. Like that's still not great.
No, absolutely not. I mean, there are more coming through the system now, but
Mm.
still few and far between. But we have got much better numbers than you then, actually, because I think we are over 20% women now in the armed
Right.
forces generally.
Oh,
Their
that's
aim
good.
was to hit 30% by 2030. They won't get to that,
Mm.
but we are over 20% now, I
Well, that
believe,
that's
within the
good to
military.
hear. That's really good to
Yeah.
hear. And Mandy, what advice would you give to any female that is considering a life in the services? Not be it like they maybe don't want to go down the path of being a fighter pilot, but what advice can you give to them if they actually just want to be in the military?
Yeah, I mean, there are so many. I mean, the Air Force has got 63 different roles. There are so many different roles. There's so much opportunity. And there's a great opportunity to shine as well. If you want a career that is out of the ordinary, it's a phenomenal career. And so, yeah, I mean, it wouldn't be any difference as advice for a young woman than it would be for a young man. Do something different, make a difference. You can make a huge difference on not just your own development, but on that of society. And you can be proud to serve. It's a huge honor to represent your country.
Mm.
And I think we've lost that a little bit. The UK is not in the best place politically at the moment. We're seeing a lot of young people saying, I wouldn't want to serve our government. I wouldn't want to. I don't think we're in a state. There's been a lot of, chat about the royal family and all of these things. And so we are losing a little bit of that pride in our
Mm.
country, which is a real shame. It used to be that the Aussies would leave Australia to come to the UK. Now they're all then going in the opposite direction. So yeah, my son at the moment is over in Australia. He is absolutely loving it.
Good, good.
So
Well,
yeah,
Mandy, it's across the board. It's here as well. Like they did a poll here in Australia for young kids. Would you, if a war broke out today, would you defend in our homeland? Would you defend?
yeah,
And I think the 18 to 29 said, I think it was about 30% said yes, we would fight. Most of them said no, and that's sad. That's
yeah,
really sad because I know for myself, like you, I'm a patriarch for my country, and if a war was declared on our homeland, I would defend my homeland because
yeah,
I love Australia, and it's a beautiful country, and so it's not just in the UK. It seems to be
yeah,
across the globe. So,
yeah.
and yeah, I don't know how we change that, Mandy. I really don't.
No, I
And
don't.
yeah, so. What advice do you wish you had have been given when you first contemplated joining the RAF and or you would have got that advice soon after you did actually go through the process and join?
Yeah, I think it would be to be a little bit stronger in challenging process and protocols. So, you know, the Air Force had changed the rules to allow women to fly, but they actually hadn't changed any of they changed policy, but they hadn't changed any of the process behind it. So I think, for example, when I'd had children and they tried to post me straight back to the front line, that was never going to work. And yet they said, but that's the way it has to work. No, it's the way it's always worked in the past because they've all been men. But those men haven't necessarily been breastfeeding a 4-month-old baby. So I think it was about, for myself, I just accepted everything because I was so delighted to be given the opportunity, because the opportunity hadn't existed before. So my advice to my younger self would be, yeah, you were being given an amazing opportunity, but you could still have challenged to get changed through quicker.
Mm.
And we were talking about things like, could you do part-time? Could you find a desk job once you've had children whereby you could do that part-time? We were considering writing a white paper for the government about this, and everyone said it's never going to happen, not in the role that you're in. Well, actually, guess what? They're doing it now. So, but that was 20 years later. So it's almost like, gosh, if I'd have perhaps challenged more and used my voice more. But I think in those days, I was just so delighted to have the opportunity, which is wrong.
And I'm glad you highlighted that it's, look, hindsight is a wonderful thing. It
Yeah.
really is. And sometimes we wish we could go back and do things different, but hopefully going forward that changes, and the changes are, progressing to where they should be. And hopefully we can only hope, Mandy, we can only hope.
Yeah, absolutely.
What,
Absolutely.
Mandy, what advice would you give to wives and partners of defence personnel, because you have lived that life of being both a veteran and the wife of a veteran and being a veteran yourself? What advice can you give to them just to, know what they're getting into?
I think it's an interesting one, really, because for myself, Craig was coming to the end of his career. So he was in, but it was very much more that he was more based in one location. I was the one that was always traveling.
Mm.
And so I think, that was sort of challenging inside itself. But I think it's difficult because when you're getting into that, you are accepting in some ways that you will be moving around a lot, that you often feel that your career is secondary to theirs because you have to move. And so you feel like you're just hitting restart constantly on your career. So there are huge sacrifices that you have to make, actually, as the spouse of someone that is in the military.
Mm.
And it will be tough. When I look back, at one point, Craig was based in the south of England, and I was based up in Lossiemouth in Scotland, and it's like, you're going to spend a lot of time having a horrible sinking feeling on a Sunday, thinking, I've got to leave and go back. Every weekend would start pretty much on a Saturday morning, but be finishing by Sunday lunchtime. So, it's tough. It was tough, and there's no way of getting around that. That's just something that we're going to have to accept. Or you say, okay, that one other person will always have to commute, and I'm going to create a stable home and centre for the family or for myself, and I'm not going to give up my career. And we are seeing that more and more, whereby, that feeling of the hub of being on the station and living in married quarters, that's sort of changed a lot now. A lot more people living out, a lot more people leaving straight after work on a Friday, perhaps traveling back early Monday morning because they aren't living on the station. So I do think we are seeing a lot more of that because we're recognizing that both people in that relationship have equally important careers. But yeah, it can be tough, and that is just part and parcel to it.
Yeah, and I've had so many veterans on that have said their greatest sacrifice has been to their family, like through going overseas and deploying, and that they've all said the time, we were trying to make for our family and create a life has been our greatest sacrifice because we've lost that time with our kids. They've grown up and they're out living their lives now, and it's the same in first responder. There is sacrifice. No reward comes without sacrifice, and unfortunately, so no, that's great advice. And I've got two final questions, Mandy, and I just want to thank you for your time that you have given for the podcast because I know your schedule is just crazy. So I really do appreciate the time that you've given
Pleasure.
me. And knowing what you know now and all that you've been through, what advice would you give your 18-year-old self, and would she listen, looking back now?
Yeah, I hope she would. To believe in herself, to not accept no for an answer, carry on pushing back against boundaries, but also to not to shrink to fit into places, to be able to recognize that the quality of what she is bringing is unmatched, and actually to radiate and shine and bring her personality, not to try to be a grey man. That classic phrase, be the grey man. Why be the grey man when you're a 6 foot tall blonde woman? Be the 6 foot tall blonde woman and radiate and shine in that position.
And you absolutely did that, Mandy. You absolutely did that too, and stood out and had
Yeah, I didn't have much choice, to be honest.
no, you didn't. Unfortunately, even if you wanted to, you couldn't. So
Yeah,
sometimes you think, oh, just would like to be that little bit shorter so I don't stand out.
yeah,
No, unfortunately, not for you, Mandy. And
no,
that, but you did. You had a distinguished career, and you did it on your terms, which is what
yeah.
it's all about. And that's all you can ask. And I've got one final question, then I'm going to wrap it up with a little bit of a. I always like to finish the podcast, and it's just, as I said, it's just been amazing to have you on. And Mandy, you're now a published author. Published author of two books now, and I've listened to the first book, and it is apps I highly, highly recommend, and I can't wait for your second book to get on Audible, and
Just
I
gone,
can.
just gone now
Just
on
just
Audible.
gone. There you go. So
Yeah,
I can listen to that one, and the first one was absolutely amazing, and the second one can't wait to get my ears into it and listen to it. And so you're doing all these amazing things, keynote speaker, all these things that you now do. What are your plans going forward into the future for you and your family now? Now that you're so busy doing your keynote, and have you got another book in
yeah.
you? Do you think you got another book?
Yeah, well, it was quite funny actually at the book launch for the second book. I wrote it in collaboration with my husband. It's called my first one was an officer, not a gentleman. So the second one, written with Craig, was going to be an officer and her gentleman. And he was asked in the book launch by someone in the audience, "What has this done to your relationship?" And he responded immediately and very quickly, "It's murdered it." I then said, "Could I have the microphone, please?" And I said, "Yes, I'm now preparing book three. It's called An Officer Looking for a New Gentleman." So, yeah, there's great banter between the two of us. But there's probably, I don't know if there's a third book. Who knows? I never say never, but it's not on the agenda at the moment. I think I'll just enjoy book two being out at the moment. But for myself, actually, do you know what? I love what I do, and I intend to do what I'm doing until I no longer love what I'm doing, or until I'm no longer popular. And once I'm no longer popular, then I'll stop doing it. And we've got an amazing motorhome. I love my husband, got a great relationship with my kids. So I tell you what, if anyone's wanting to book a keynote speaker, I'm wanting to come out to Australia actually.
Yes,
So that's something we need to sort out.
I was going to say,
Yeah, so,
I'd love, now that your son's out here for a couple of years, I was going to say, are
yeah.
we going to see Mandy out here? Are we going to see her in Australia?
Absolutely. Yeah. So I just need to get a few bookings. Perhaps, October time, if anyone's
Yeah,
looking for a
yeah.
keynote speaker in October,
Good
I
weather
think I might
then.
try and do
Good
it.
good weather. You're coming in good
Yeah.
time. So that's
Yeah, exactly. But it's
October,
spring.
October, November, December. That's
Yeah,
good times over here. So bring your
exactly.
swimmers because it
Yeah.
is beautiful weather. So, but I'm sure there's someone out that would absolutely love to get you on and do a keynote out here. So I'm sure it
Yeah. So
can
that's the
happen.
plan.
Yeah,
You
fantastic.
utilize travel. I love travel. So, I'm just making my career work for me at the moment. And that's as long as I can do that for as long as I will, I'll carry on.
Absolutely. And well, I think when you do come out, we'll definitely have to catch up. And when I come over there, hopefully
Definitely.
early next year, I hope to be back over in the UK and we can all
Listen, I'll
catch up.
take you out for a beer.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, I'd love that. That'd be fantastic. So, and as I said, thank you so much for your time. And I'll
My
finish,
pleasure.
I'll wrap up now with this little bit of a quote. And Mandy, you have served your country with honor and brought pride to your family. Your story is one of true grit, determination, and dreaming to succeed at the elite level and literally setting to the sky. And you absolutely achieved that. And I want to thank you for your service and the work that you do for veterans and also others and shining a light on mental health, and I know that is a big thing for you now and a big driving factor in your keynote talks that you do. And I appreciate you coming on True Blue and sharing your story. It's been an absolute honour and a privilege. So, Mandy Hickson, thank you so much.
Thank you, Adam. My pleasure.
Cheers.
Thanks for listening to True Blue Conversations with your host, Adam Bloom. Real talk with those that pledge to keep us safe with grit, sacrifice, and determination. See you next time.